Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens here with a look at kind of a daily weather wrap up. We do this every weekday during 5 o'clock Mountain, 7 Eastern, and then 4 o'clock on the West Coast. And at various times, obviously, around the world, you just do your time correction or just look at the clock now because, hey, we're live right now. There's a few things going on after having spent some time in Puerto Rico last year and the year prior. We kind of got to know the island's susceptibility to bad weather, especially after Maria did incredible and extensive damage to the island's infrastructure that was already aging, already not well cared for. And they're just having another close call with the tropical storm. It's not even a named storm at that, and already the island is dealing with power problems. Indeed, they've been some parts of the island have been without power for the better part of 30 hours now. And so when you tell people that there's a storm coming, there's a reaction. It's a guttural reaction because of PTSD of dealing with Maria. And so when you see the infrastructure taken down, as has happened in Puerto Rico, prior to the storm's arrival, it creates a little bit of anxiety, and that's exactly what's happening right now. And hey, Robin, good to see you coming on in there. Let's roll on in this as we begin to kind of roll up what's going on in the world. Western Europe, after dealing with a rather cool start to the summer and rather wet at that. Rather really wet at that. It looks like Friday, as we wrap up the month of July, will be one of the warmer days of the year for Western Europe. Now we go off to the east, and this is not the case. The breadbasket, as you get to the Urals in south of Moscow, I can't say all, but a large portion of Western Russia has been cool through the summer and continues to be cool now, and the models continue to forecast the cool will continue, and they are really the prime grain growing region of that continent. And Tropical Cyclone 9, it hasn't even been named yet, is strengthening over the Leeward Islands and continues or expected to be a tropical storm as it heads on to the east. And then we've got kind of a large low. We'll look at that from above, spinning north of the Alaskan coastline as it churns up what ice remains up there. All right, heavy rains. We've talked about this last week and earlier this week that we are anticipating some of those heavy Chinese rains to cross the Sea of China, cross the Korean Peninsula, and then impact Japan. And that has been the case as nearly 2,500 people evacuated as record rainfall hits northern Japan, triggering floods and landslides. In Mumbai records wettest July since records began. We're looking at like 150 years as their monsoon has been unprecedented. Bangladesh also in that zone, and we'll look to see some of the forecast models how much rain is still in the cards for these places that are already and have already recorded their wettest July so far. So just kind of amazing, amazing rainfalls. And I'm telling you, this is what happens when the oceans warm up. Rain comes. The big fear with global warming was drought, and that is not the case. There's just no way a warmer planet, which inevitably means more evaporation, cannot result in more rainfall. And when there's more rainfall, you're going to get more vegetation. More vegetation is more green. More green means more evapotranspiration as you get that moisture through the plant and back into the atmosphere. It's simply called the water cycle, and it is one of the first things they teach in meteorology, but seems to be completely lost in the global warming chit chat. This is kind of crazy, and I'm telling you, as much as I love the skies, this person was fortunate enough to catch the last 7-8 seconds of whatever was coming in, racing in very fast and then breaking up, literally breaking up as it made re-entry. Now there are a couple of flashes up in here. This guy right there, that is just a lens reflection, a reflection inside the lens apparatus of the camera. And we have a lot of videos. You can kind of see it moves in advance. At some point, the two will eventually merge, but as it moves away from the center of the frame, along with the object that we're shooting, so that's just a lens artifact. I don't know what it was. Inbound from space. There's been a lot of those kind of sightings lately, so I kind of find them fascinating. And we had 2 meteor showers last night, and like the northern lights, you can begin to see the different colors, the oxygen, the iron, the calcium, the sodium, the magnesium, as a meteor will belie or give away its content, its oxygen content. So that really kind of is one of the cool things about meteors, is that can give away their chemical composition is spectrography. You put something under a fire, a Bunsen burner, and calcium's going to burn that bright, bright purple. Sodium is more of an orangey red, and magnesium, of course, is a brighter white. All right, I'm going the other way. All right, there's a tropical potential cyclone number 9. Isaias would be the name. We'll see if it gets that name, and the guidance has continued to draw it farther south of Puerto Rico, across the island of Hispaniola, and that's not a small island. It is not without its mountainous ranges, which would certainly disrupt its wind flow, and then grazing the north coast of Cuba. That is, granted, if this model is right, and then somewhere into the far eastern Gulf of Mexico as we get into the early part of next week. And then this is kind of cool because folks up in Alaska and then those northern polar regions just don't have a lot of good satellite resources, because the ones we're using down here are geostationary. So if you've got the Earth here, they're way out here, and then as the Earth turns, the satellite just follows the same place overhead. But we've also got this other constellation of satellites, and then they go around the poles. They cross the North Pole, then sweep to the South Pole, back to the North Pole. So they're not stationary all the time. They make these very regular 90-minute to 3-hour passes. And one of the things that I'm always fascinated with, coming at this from a rather curious eye, are the squares that show up inside what should be whirlpool-like shapes. It shows some kind of resonance pattern. Right here, arc, and then a straight line. When do you get a straight line that lasts for any length of time inside a moving fluid? Honestly, you shouldn't. These kind of shapes should not even exist, especially when they come from an anchor point or a, let's see if we can zoom on in here just a little bit more. It almost like it emerges from a box and then, takes on a straight line, but otherwise the curls are around it. And you'll see this often in the weather today, and it's a curious feature. It really got me going into the geoengineering aspect of things. We've got another launch coming up here. NASA will launch its Persevere mission to Mars. So it is scheduled for launch at 5:50 a.m. Mountain Time tomorrow morning, as we once again head off towards the red planet. We have at least 3 missions on the way. I think ours is third. The United Arab Emirates used the Japanese launch facility, and that happened 2 weeks ago. The Chinese launched last week, and we're going today. As a launch window is in place, and we got to get these birds on the way so we can take advantage of. I think it's a biannual launch opportunity for the opportunity to get to Mars. Yeah, hey, there's Robin once again. All right, let's come on over here. We talked about China. We didn't show any videos today. It's amazing how little new information is coming out of that place, out of that country. The censorship wall was really tightened up with the COVID incidences, and they've really plugged a lot of leaks, pun intended, about information coming out of China. And whenever the CCP appears to be encountering a problem, that flow of information is just clamped down. As they've tried to release the flow of water into the rivers, the Yangtze River is letting go at about 28 acre-feet of water per second. That is a lot of water, and it's just flooded all these. So what I'm looking at is the model. It's precipitation total in millimeters, and it's out over the next 384 hours, or essentially 16 days. And we're looking at the scale down here, 500 millimeters, or 20 inches. 20 inches. West coast of India, 20 inches. Bangladesh, up along the mountains, along the Nepalese mountain ranges as they butt up against the Himalayas, nearly 20 inches worth of rain. The south coast of China, 20 inches worth of new rain. The North Korea, 20 inches of new rain in the next 2 weeks. So there are copious amounts of water that are inbound. And as we look at or above normal in the blues, almost all of Korea, at least 5.5 inches of rain above normal. Same story with all of the Chinese side, on the other side of India, other side of Bhutan, other side of Laos and Cambodia, at least 5 to 6 inches of water above normal. Same story for that entirety of the south coast. So this water problem is not going away anytime soon. And we just saw that big low churning off of the north coast of Alaska. That's associated with this deep low that remains in place. And it's kind of the conduit. We've had the big hot high that's gotten all the headlines, but you've got one big hot high, and look how many cold lows are in place. the square miles of one versus the other, there's really no comparison. So it's like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 towards the end of this model run where there's cooler weather instead of warm weather in place. All right, let's keep moving on here. Back stateside, the monsoon has been nice and healthy through the southwest. It's taken a bit of a break today as part of it was pushed north, and now it's had to return off to the south. It got as far north as central Montana, and now it's beginning to retreat back towards Nebraska, where they've turned rather wet. Nice rains in North Texas and Oklahoma and parts of Kansas last night, with more thunderstorms kind of erupting in the course of the day today. Elsewhere, the Northeast also with some showers, and their temperatures much cooler than they have been over the last week. Off to Puerto Rico, where you can see the sunset is just now crossing the island, and they've had some good rains, finally some good rains, as they have been so very dry. So these rains are welcome, and a nice big shield out there. Some nice rains popping up also along the southwest coast, about headed through Ponce, Juana Diaz, Los Marias, all these places that's up here, but about to get some good rain. So maybe they can see some relief from some dry weather that they have had lately. And back stateside, there's our showers. Severe weather, not really so many warned areas. That looks like a little red dot near Rochester, New York, or Kodak getting a little bump because they're being commissioned to bring home a lot of pharmacy, let's just say, ingredients that are necessary for pharmaceutical products from China. So Rochester, New York, and Kodak kind of getting back in the game there, and much, much needed. Some severe weather in Kansas, Oklahoma, on up into Nebraska, all fueled by some temperatures bumping up on that 90-degree mark, but there's also pot marks where temperatures are in the 60s and 70s. So it's not like the nation is enduring, a wicked week of hot weather. The hot is in place, certainly through the central California, and really all the way up into Pullman, Oregon, through the Columbia River Gorges. They're into the triple digits, so that is just plenty old warm. But for the Northeast, comfortable 90s, but lower with humidities, and the really comfy weather has to be Minnesota, with north winds and temperatures in the 90s at mid-afternoon, and that's always agreeable in July. Folks along the Louisiana coast, Texas, and Florida, like, oh, please, 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 can't we just vacation in Colorado? Can't we go up to Minnesota for a weekend? That's really what they'd like to. And there's even another cool front that today is working through Ontario and Quebec, after we've had one just almost clear the Great Lakes today, and then another kind of stationary front hung up a little bit farther south. The red areas, as we've come to know, dealing with heavy rain, flash flooding possible, and or the risk of severe weather. That area continues almost in the same location because the jet stream is so weak, nothing is really going anywhere in a hurry right now. If you're wet, you're going to stay wet. If it's cool, then not so bad. And then by day 3, they're bringing in tropical depression number 9, tropical cyclone number 9. We haven't really given it a name just as of yet. Yeah, 20 inches, that's a whole lot of rain, Vicky, a whole lot of rain. 20 inches is more than we get here in the San Luis Valley, at least at our elevations in an entire year. That would just be plain old ugly. Some record heat's going to be back in the game as we play Thursday, Friday. It's out west. It's simply out west from El Paso at 104, Elko 103, Needles, California at 118. That would break a record from that set just 2 years ago, but their record goes all the way back to 1880, right in through there in Needles, California. Pendleton, Oregon, 107. Phoenix at 116. Roswell, New Mexico at 103. Tucson at 110. Yakima, Washington at 106. So, like France, we're going to end July with probably what will end up being the warmest weather of the year. And that'll be the good thing as we get this weekend out of the way. I'm going to pop up over here to North America and leave the Atlantic because we can kind of see depression number 9 rolling into the screen right through there. And it kind of tightens up. A similar path to what Hurricane Dorian did last year, the year before. Remember that massive Bahamas event? Very similar path, but at least at this point in the game where we're inside of 3 days out, we know it's not going to be a Category 5 storm. That's just a given. Or probably a 4, probably not even a 3. And there's some argument that it'll barely be a Category 2, but any hurricane at a direct hit is too big. But this crazy high remains anchored across the west, and that's going to be responsible for the heat, even though the valiant attempts of a nice, cool Pacific low will try to beat it down. By next Tuesday, Wednesday, it'll break down a little bit, and that opens up the Pacific to bring in some cooler air. But the heat still is going to hang into the southwest. It's just seasonably the time of year for that to happen. So we just have to accept that that's going to be the situation. with very little in the way of monsoon moisture for California, for Nevada, and even for the Pacific Northwest. It just doesn't appear to be in the cards. Where the potential for heavy rains would be is where they have been recently, and shifts east to the mid-Mississippi, Ohio, and Tennessee River valleys, where they all kind of confluence around the boot heel of Missouri, and then the Mississippi just stays high as we move through the season. So that's kind of the outlook. 6 to 10 days. I haven't refreshed this baby yet today, but it had cool weather. And yeah, back to the east, and that's kind of where the heights or the jet stream stays a little bit cooler, and that's going to be reflected in lower power bills, and that's not a bad thing. But near the hottest week of the year, or the hottest couple of weeks of the year, the hottest month of the year, if you can stay 3, 4, 5 degrees below normal, that is always welcome. And then the drought outlook for the season, it just kind of continues the drought through the middle of the west. In fact, a big chunk of the Pacific Northwest still on the dry side, all the way through Utah, through a bunch of Colorado, and then into the southern high plains. Just stay on the dry. And with drought development likely in the orange or the pale yellow, right through a bunch of Texas. And we will get an update to how the nation did in the drought situation tomorrow. That is always a Thursday morning release, and I look forward to that because, I'm just kind of a nerd. Just kind of a nerd that way. So what do we have over here? Helping out in the garden, Risa. Yeah, that's where Donnie is right now. He's out there watering the weeds, which all of a sudden became very valuable because he realized what naturally happens outside was actually good for a big part of the population long before the seed companies got their mittens in the game. You kind of either had to bring the seeds with you as you pioneered into the West or pioneered into new territory, or like the indigenous people, you made do with what is there. So good morning, Tracy. Good to see you over there on the, hard to believe we're enjoying the same kind of sun being so far away. Feel blessed to be in the mountains, you and me both, Robin. Even if we're in the lower 80s and I had to turn off the fan to endure the kind of warmth that's in place. And Vicki, yeah, that's a lot of heat. That is crazy warm in the desert Southwest. That's just nuts. All right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I'm going to do a little show, well, not so little, it's a half hour. Another perspective coming up here in about 40 minutes. We've got to address something that is certainly not a very sexy topic, the petrodollar, but it has been the foundation of global commerce now since the end of World War II. And with some kind of cracks in the system, it appears that there's some changes that are probably imminently on the horizon for the dollar. And by default, that impacts commerce around the globe. The dollar being the reserve currency used to be backed by gold, then it was backed by oil, and with oil a month, 2 months ago dropping to negative values, meaning they had to pay somebody to take the oil off their hand because the contract was due, that really kind of draws into question then what is the dollar backed by? So we'll talk about that topic and then some options, because there are always options. Whenever you make a decision about one thing, you've chosen not to do something else or a series of other something else's. We'll kind of jump on into that here as another perspective coming up at 6 o'clock Mountain. All right, thanks for stopping in, and love to see your comments. Even after the show is done, hit hashtag replay or subscribe to the channel, and just show us some love that way. All right, everybody, take care. Thanks for coming on in, and as always, hey,